I'm amazed at this program you put together and amazed at the thought that went into it. And I'm just trying to retrace that thought. So you got Mark Pope, one of the great motivational speakers of the world, followed by all those other people, James the Iron Cowboy, Lisa Clark, the Skinwalker Ranch, and then the most dynamic women in Utah politics. And then they thought, now how are we going to finish up? Oh, let's bring in the lotion guy. That'll be a strong finish for the day. We'll go straight for lotion. As I begin, I've been to this event, I don't know, a dozen times over the last years, and it's really something that I look forward to and think about and enjoy being with. I enjoy being with you, and I'm just so impressed with the good things that you all do in this community, that you think about more than just your own businesses, but the community at large, and that thinking is yielding some amazing benefits that'll go a long way. Can I just go off script for a minute and talk about Lisa Clark's husband? She left, I think. I don't see her anymore, and maybe that's good, or you'd think that I was just trying to talk to her, but I knew her husband. Yeah, I served on the UVU Board of Trustees with several of you, actually, through the years, and on one of those assignments, I served on committees with him, and he was just a bright light, just the smartest guy in the room. And I'm trying to figure out who he was in my first meeting, and well, he's a drama teacher. In my high school, the drama teacher wasn't the brightest guy in the room, but here he truly was. Do you know this about him, that he put together entered a competition, a Kennedy Center competition, where you had local and then regional competitions, and then the winner got to go to the Kennedy Center and do a competition there, where a whole bunch of plays are put on, and then there's a winner that is chosen there. Well, he took put a play together at UVU, and took it through that process, and then won at the Kennedy Center, which is astonishing. Yale was there, Stanford was there, UCLA was there, USC was there. Where was the theatrical center of the universe that year? It was Orem, Utah, because of that guy. Well, so then the next year, he decides, well, that was such a good learning experience, let's do it again, but that was a little too easy. This time, let's do a musical. And so he went through that whole process with a musical, first place at the Kennedy Center 2 years in a row. Probably never been done before, probably never happen again. But that's the kind of guy he was. And as I hear her talking about resilience, and oh my goodness, isn't she a breathtaking visual aid of resilience herself? But the approach he took to life, just that level of exuberant creativity, is the same thing. The same resilient attitude that he took to his end of life. So we can all learn a lot from that family. Amazing, amazing people in this community. Starting there, maybe. I think we have a slide. Can we put up a slide? So they asked me if I would come and speak about resilience. I said, I don't really spend a lot of time reading those books. I'm not sure I'm the guy you want to be there. And the answer was, well, your company's been around for 37 years in an industry that has a half-life of a butterfly life, kind of a thing. You must know something about this. And maybe what people would like to hear is just, tell your corporate story and about how, resilience came to the fore as you moved along. I think about, and so I'm going to do that, and I'll try to be quick here so that we can get right to those mountain bikes. Between now and the next, contrasting this and the next event you're going to, I promise you won't get hurt in this room. That's my only guarantee. I was once on a business trip to Asia, and I talked to heard a woman presenting. She, just a young Asian girl, she said that she grew up on the edge of a large Asian city. Her father made a living. He somehow came across a wooden cart, and he would go out into the countryside early in the morning, and he would buy vegetables, and then he would push that cart into the city and sell vegetables in the city. And if he was effective and everything went well, he would sell enough stuff that he could buy a meal or two for his family and have enough left over to go back out into the fields the next day and buy vegetables again so that he could go back into the city day after day, week after week, year after year, for all of her life. And she said that she lived in dread as she grew older for that certain day that she knew was coming when she was going to learn that he had been found on the side of the road of some filthy Asian city, having been overwhelmed by the task. And that was hugely motivating to her because she had no education. She only knew what he had taught her, but she was powerless to do anything about it. Now, that story resonates with us all because just the pathos of that situation, but it has something to do with us too, doesn't it? You know, she just had a narrow little toolbox of things to do, and she was facing an unfathomably complex world. And sometimes this one feels like that to me and to you. You know, if you've ever had to have your financial well-being depend on your comprehension of such things as securitized real estate portfolios, crypto, voodoo, blockchain, distributed ledgers, or even the mysteries of the IRS code, then you're carrying some stress in your life, and you may wish for an easier life. You know, disruption usually is a disruption of something simple with something more complex, and we've iterated enough now that we live in a very complex, sophisticated world where you know, we seem to have figured it out. You all seem to be okay. I'm not going to worry about you keeping the lights turned on, but every one of you is worried about your children and what comes next. And in my current avocation, I can't decide right now which is my hobby and which is my job, but I think a lot about your children and mine and the future that they all hold. So what are our challenges? Brandon Fugel just kind of painted the picture. It's the biggest challenge is those magnetron readings around Utah County, you know, on the SkinRider, well, whatever. Our Aurora scope is very, very concerning these days. No, our concern is just the opposite, isn't it? That things are growing to the point we wonder whether, you know, our kids are going to have a place to live, whether they're going to be, you know, be able to figure out how to get through school, how they're going to figure out how to make a living and so forth. I don't worry as much about that because they've got you for that, but I do worry about the world that they're being born into. A friend of mine runs one of the major ad agencies in the world, and he's got a client that doesn't just never-ending deep research involving tens of thousands of youth trying to figure out what the future looks like. He said their research is showing globally 68% of our youth do not anticipate ever marrying in their lives. 68% think that marriage would be a burden, not a blessing in their lives. About the same number, never plan to have children. Now, I hope that's 14 to 18-year-olds. Hopefully they'll grow out of that, some of them. But where do they get attitudes like that? They didn't get them from you. Where do they get those attitudes? It's got something to, my friends' company's conclusion is that they're plugging something into their ears every day that is putting messaging through powerful music and powerful rhetoric that passes their common sense and goes straight into their inner brain, and those ideas are being absorbed. If we want to make our kids resilient, we've got to teach them principles, and we got to inoculate them from horrible principles. Somebody shared with me, one of our board members at New Skin, shared with me a little sheet of Gene Autry's 10 cowboy virtues. And I read through those 10 cowboy virtues, and I thought, you know what? You could listen to three popular songs in the top 10 right now, and they will countermand every one of those 10 virtues. They'll say the opposite of that is true. And so if our kids are going to be resilient, those values will not create a resilient community going on in the future. All right, that's my other job, speaking to you for a minute. You know, here in this valley, we worry about not leaving anybody behind, and we worry about trying to figure out transportation and education and all those other things. And that's why we have meetings like this, and this is why I'm so proud of this community, because you are smarter about those things than anywhere else I'm aware of in this little world. We just watched the Tokyo Olympic Games. That was kind of a fun place to look at resilience in this COVID year. And I love the stories of like Katie Ledecky and Simone Manuel, who were swimmers, but their multi-billion-dollar swim centers, Olympic swim centers, were all shut down because of COVID, so they were just left on their own. And they ended up winning gold medals in the Olympics, but their training regimen amounted virtually to jumping the fence of a neighbor with a pool and training in backyard pools in order to keep their, to improve their fitness and to prepare for that day. There's that amazing Philippine woman, Hidilyn Diaz. Hidilyn, I don't know that name. It's a Filipino name, I guess. She was the weightlifter, the power lifter. She got locked out of her own country during most of COVID because of the transportation lockdowns. And so she started training running up and down parking lot on-ramps in order to get her cardiovascular up. And then she got a bamboo pole and put water buckets or water barrels on either side of it and did her weightlifting, using that crude thing. Her mantra became no barbell, no problem. She just used what she had and was kind of animated by maybe what Maya Angelou would have said, I can be changed by what happens to me, but I refuse to be reduced by it. And just doing what she could with what she had when she could get around to it, she ends up winning the first gold medal in her country's history. First woman to win a gold medal in Philippine history with a bamboo pole and a couple of water buckets or whatever that was. It's amazing how much we can do when we just, when we've got that kind of resiliency that we're willing to do it. So what rules of life do we take into this business? When I was in the Army, after I served a mission for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and then went in the Army for 3 years. And so I'm in basic training. I'm straight home from a mission. They didn't even have to give me a new haircut. I was ready to go. And in basic training, we had this, where you got your drill sergeant, and he's as, as ridiculously mean as they paint them to be. You remember Gomer Pyle, Sergeant Carter? It's that guy. They got 100 of him. They've got him everywhere. And so we would be out, running. We got a hard hat on. We got rifle over the shoulder. We got combat boots on. We got a pistol belt on with a poncho in the back. And we've been running for miles. And the way that the drill sergeant would operate was when he started to get tired, he would speed up the cadence of the run until somebody collapsed. And he would hear somebody drop their rifle or turn around and look, and we'd have broken ranks a little bit. Then he would stop and make us do push-ups while he rested, and then we would start running again. Well, it turned out that the guy that was usually the guy that was dropping his rifle was Private. I won't tell you his name because I've never seen him since, but you might know him. He's from Ogden, Utah. I was in Fort Ord, California, and here was this guy I had this very remote connection to, but he belonged to the same club I belonged to, and so one day this was happening, and I saw him starting to stagger a little bit as we're going, and I could see where this was going, and I just kind of ran up alongside of him, traded places with the guy who was there, and took his rifle so that he couldn't drop it, and then ran along with him. And after a while, the drill sergeant looks back, and we're all good. And he ran somewhere. Our goal was to kill the man. We thought we could. He was a little overweight. He was smoking cigarettes. And then as we go along, somebody else started to stagger. Somebody else grabbed their rifle, and went alongside of him. And so we just continued to go along, and people started, just started filling in for each other, hands on backs, just kind of taking a little bit of the load off, until we killed the man. He finally had to stop and let us all rest together because he needed the rest. So it was a win. But this was the amazing realization I had. I didn't do that to be selfless. I didn't want to do the push-ups, but I found that I had more energy for the fight when I was carrying an extra rifle than when I was just struggling on my own. And in corporate life, that has proven to be, I'm not very good at it, but it's a true principle that if when you're having those hard days and doing those hard things together, to just kind of look around and realize that there are other people that are struggling and that are, at the end of their capacities too, and to just do what you can do to lift their loads will create a cohesion that translates somehow into endurance to go on and continue on and to find answers. We have a picture of the early years of New Skin. Those characters, and a bunch of others, put together this company that was, and it started in, it's one of those stories that literally started in a living room of a condominium in Provo, Utah. And where they'd get together and think about, okay, what do we do and how do we do this? Our technology was ridiculous. We would, well, I'll get to that in a moment, but it just seemed like every day we'd come in and there would be some problem would present itself that was unsurmountable. One of the early problems was our earliest technology acquisition was an answering machine. Remember those? So we'd come in the morning and turn on the answering machine, and it would just regurgitate the nastiest bile. People angry about this, and something's going wrong, and you said you were going to, and so we solved that problem by we unplugged it and put it in a drawer, because if we listened to the answering machine, we could never get anything done the next day. We couldn't solve the problems because we were talking about the problems. And so, that was kind of the way it was. And on one particularly ugly day, I kind of slumped in the chair and said, man, this is really hard. And he says, and Blake Roney, and many of you know Blake, he's the smartest guy I know. He's also the funniest guy I know. But he says, well, we can't be discouraged by this. This is business. This is what business is all about. This is the definition of business. It's just problem solving. It could be math over in the chemistry department someplace. They're working on chemistry. Here we work on solving business problems. And our success is just going to be rooted on solving those problems better than others. Everybody in the space is having these same problems. They're solving them, we can solve them too. And when we solve a problem, he said, we create a barrier to entry that we throw up behind ourselves that somebody else is going to have to solve that problem if they're going to be able to compete with us. So when we see a really difficult problem, since we're really smart guys, we should rejoice, because that means that there's opportunity here once we've solved that problem to have some durability and some longevity. Blake still always says, incidentally, there are no geniuses around here, but there is a collective genius, in these buildings where if we can collaborate together, if we all think about problems together, we're going to solve, the most intractable problems. And 37 years later, right up until this very moment when I'm missing a board meeting where critical things are being talked about, I'm not losing sleep because those problems will solve. They will resolve because we're there together. Wasn't that a fascinating little insight that Brandon brought up? Work from home is killing initiative because it's killing collaboration. I thought that was so insightful. I found this, we watched the work from home thing, and what did you hear? For the first year or so, we're saying, hey, this is working better than working in the office. We're never going back. And I thought at the time, our corporate culture has been so important to our success that I thought, can you build corporate culture remotely? And I thought, we're enjoying, our productivity did go up, like a lot of people's did. It did go up at first. I thought, that corporate culture is allowing us to thrive in this very challenging atmosphere. But at some point in time, it'll start to wear out, I'm afraid. And how do you build new corporate cultures or bring new leadership and new talent into the mix? How do you inculcate those corporate values and that affection and commitment to each other that you get when you're in the same room, sweating over the same problems? And so I'm proving to be a prophet, it turns out, on that one front that you all figured out long before I did, but that matters. I was talking for a moment about our technology. We're a direct selling company, and so we pay commissions on sales. And so we knew from the beginning that our system of 3x5 cards with a name at the top, and we'd go through and put numbers on them and stack them up and then record commissions. That wasn't going to last very long if we were going to grow to be a company. So bought a, we had a PC that we put a little, very early PC. What was that, a 286 or something like that, that we started this system with, and we've continued to grow in technology until, now we're all cloud-based and so forth. But we knew from the beginning that our success in our particular space was going to really depend upon our ability to find and deploy technology. Now, we have been heard to say, I've heard myself say this, that, we were actually one of the early tech companies in Silicon Slopes. They think, well, you're a lotion company, you're not a tech company, but in fact, our success in our space has all been really very much centered in technology. And here's how it kind of came to play. We did well in the United States, and then we got to a place where we needed to extend our borders. And as we went to do that, most companies, everybody in our space at the time, if they went and opened a new country, they would go open an office, and they would start recruiting people in that new country, in that new office. And the people in their home country weren't allowed to participate, or they could fly over and participate, but they were starting over. And they would go recruit from their first distributor, right there. Whereas here in the United States, if we had a distributor who had a business in Salt Lake City, and he knew somebody in Chicago, he could go recruit her, who could recruit somebody in Miami, and then those people in Miami would start recruiting, and they would go and support those people, and they would kind of move around the country in platoons, because they're all motivated, financially motivated, to help each other to succeed in the United States. And then when we left the country, all of a sudden we're going to do a start over and not make that happen. Well, we thought if we could figure out how to have a global, seamless compensation plan that would let somebody from Salt Lake recruit somebody in Singapore who would report somebody in Sydney, and then back in what's an S word in Europe? Let's case Shanghai. We'll go to China instead. And then when you go to open a new country, have them arrive in platoons and battalions rather than onesies, twosies. Why am I holding this microphone when I'm wearing this microphone? Hello. Why did you hand me that microphone? The guy in the back saying, why is he? If we could figure out how to do this, so we started talking to technology people, and they started saying it can't be done. Because the communication software didn't exist to do what we had to do, and that is manage a vast genealogy chart of salespeople within their organizations, and then millions and hundreds of millions of transactions within that genealogy chart that then would span international currencies, time zones, kanji characters. Pretty soon we're having to go from Asian characters into ours, fluctuating international currencies. So you sell something from $1, and the next day it's only worth 98 cents because the currency's moved, and yet the commissions all have to be paid to those people in their own currencies. Our tech people, almost ran out the door screaming, except one of them, who just happened to be some local BYU computer science genius, and literally genius, who said, well, let me go over there. We're trying to get to Japan. Let me go over there and see what I can do. So he went over and started cobbling together, this piece of software that he found and figured out how to do stuff, invented our own new skin currency, that we could then apply algorithms to in order to make all this happen. And suddenly, I interviewed a potential president for we hired a guy to run our Japan market. He was the former Avon president. And I said, okay, so now, what if we were able to do $10 million in our first year? How would that go? Could you make that work? And he says, well, first of all, that would be breaking every record in our industry's history, so I won't worry about that too much. Well, okay, good. But what if that did happen? Well, we did $50 million in our first year because of that technology advantage. It wasn't because we were smarter. It wasn't because we had better products, although we did, and we were smarter. No. But it came down to one guy who figured out, the technology that didn't exist theretofore. Now everybody can do that. But that's what really, took us from being a moderately successful company to an international force. Today we're in 50 countries doing, a couple $1 billion in sales, and we continue to thrive in all those places. See where I want to go with this. We're a lotion company. We started out with 15 cosmetic products, and we ran into this problem that there were, we would go out and to sell our stuff, and a lot of men would show up at our meetings, and they were really interested in the business opportunity. They could see that there was power in what we were doing, and the freedom of time that it gave was so appealing to them, and they could see their wives being successful at this, but they just couldn't really ever see themselves selling shampoo for a living. And so but they'd try, and mostly their wives would succeed, and then they would become the business genius in the background, who's cashing the checks, basically, while their wives did the same. But they had capacity, too. So we decided we needed to get into a business that wasn't, to them, they thought skincare was soap on a rope, and not much beyond that. And so we felt that the next logical line extension would be into personal care nutritional products. Men do vitamins, too. And so Blake had another genius idea. We developed a nutrition line called Interior Design Nutritionals. Think about that for a moment. We're a beauty company trying to get into vitamins. To us, that felt a little bit like Goodyear tires, trying to sell perfume. They're a great brand, but that isn't going to work. Well, we needed a tie-in, and so our slogan was, you can't build good skin in a bad factory with bad ingredients. We're going to create beauty from the inside out, Interior Design Nutritionals. And we started getting some traction with that. And then we bought Pharmanex. This was a pharmaceutical company with 150 PhD scientists, most of them living in Shanghai and Beijing, China, developing nutritional products using Western pharmaceutical science that allowed us to build the most efficacious, safe, consistently manufactured products in the world. And by combining those together, suddenly we had as many men as we had women in our business, and we've been able to move forward in lockstep. Go forward a few years, and we found it harder and harder to recruit people because we were coming into that tech bubble where people were finding it more exciting to go become technology entrepreneurs than to be lotion or vitamin salesmen. And so in order to try to capture that entrepreneurial energy, we got into the tech space. We created a company called Big Planet. And this was our thesis, that the problem with technology in the late 90s was the technology was great. Well, it wasn't great, was it? It was always broken. There were a million problems, and a technologist could work their way through those problems. They would just tap away until finally it was solved. But most of us, you'd go down to Babbage's, remember that store? That's where I bought my first computer. And the guy's asking me questions like, how many RAM do you want? And do you want an optical what? And I didn't know what any of that stuff was. And so I had a hard time, engaging that product category because I just didn't know enough. Well, what do we do? What Nu Skin does, what our space does, is we're trainers. We're teachers. We can lift people up a short learning pattern and explain why this cosmetic product is different and better than the one you've got in your purse. And by the time they get through explaining that to you, because it's true, you can't live with your old stuff anymore. And we thought, what if we applied that same capacity to technology? If we found products that, obviously we're not going to turn everybody into computer scientists, and we can't turn our people into tech, the tech office next door. But if we can find products that just require a little bit of explanation to get people engaged in tech, we could probably make some money of this. It was a little desktop device. It was a little screen, and there was a little pull-out keypad that you could buy, and you plug it into your telephone cable, and it would allow you to get emails and stuff. It was a telephone, had a telephone receiver, so it worked like a telephone, but it also would feed emails at a time when emails weren't easy to get because you had to go through that whole process I was describing earlier. So our salespeople would go in and plug this thing in, show them, and 3 minutes, the people are engaged in the internet, they can get email, they can send email, they can talk on the phone, there were a number of little really interesting features. It was called the iPhone. Yes, we owned the first iPhone. It's not the one you're thinking of. This one was actually creative. And theirs, well, it came later. And we sold tens of thousands of these. We were a little bit ahead of our time, though. They hadn't quite figured out the display system, and so we started getting lots of complaints that the Cisco product didn't work very well. And we called Cisco and would walk them through and say, okay, let us research this and see what's going on. We've got a very vigorous refund policy because our relationships are all that we have. So we sold tens of thousands and we bought tens of thousands of them back. But what they said was, okay, we figured out how to solve the problem. If this thing happens where the screen fails, have them unplug it and put it in the freezer of the refrigerator overnight, and the next morning when they plug it back in, it'll work perfectly. He said, you're kidding us, right? No, that's really the solution. So anyway, that was just a learning curve too far for them to go by. But just an example of what we were doing is we engaged in, found a way to reinvent ourselves as a technology marketing company as a third pillar to our offering of cosmetics, nutrition, and now technology. And then the world really changed. We had deals put together with every technology company you had ever heard of at that time to sell their stuff because they believed our narrative, and we believed it too, that we could solve this problem for them. And then we started getting calls from, it happened within a week. Every one of those guys called and said, well, here's the problem. There's a company called Amazon that will do everything that you're promising to do, but for free. They're willing to lose money selling our product, and you are charging us money. So if you just don't charge us money, then we can still work with you. Well, the problem is we have to pay our distributor for us to do what they do, so we can't do that. And they said, well, then we'll go with Amazon and that ilk. So the artificial economy of technology kind of took the one-to-one marketing aspect out of that. So we ended up retrenching and moving forward again. And we, for a while there, I looked at that as a huge failure. We lost $100 million, at a time when that used to be a lot of money. But there was some residual benefit that stayed behind that failure, and that is that we had this whole fleet of technologists that we had brought on that we started redeploying. In order to make Big Planet work, we needed an e-commerce platform so that people could do business with us, not by fax machine and not by telephone and not by somebody with a pad and paper, but rather over the internet. And that platform that we started putting together back then to deal with that had been grown and developed and augmented until the pandemic hits. Now think about this existential problem. We are in the business of, we're doing all of our recruiting and a lot of our selling by putting together hotel meetings where people could come and somebody could get up and explain to them why these products are different, better than what they already use, and why this business operates so good. And they would look around the room and say, I like these people. These are, I hate my law practice where all we do is fight over the bones of dead things, and here these people are about the act of creation where they're building something where there was nothing, and this is so much more fun. I'm going to push my wife out of the way and do this with her. Kind of became it was what we did in hotel rooms, face-to-face, one-on-one meetings. Now tell me 10 years ago that the day would come when overnight we couldn't leave our homes. You can't leave your house. I would have told you that was going to be an existential day. We would be dead on arrival. We just have no way to do our business. And when it happened, I lost some sleep, when suddenly that announcement came out. But you know what happened? Those creative geniuses that are our sales force, these hundreds of thousands of people around the world, woke up that morning and said, okay, so I can't have hotel meetings and I can't go meet people on the street or in my office. What am I going to do? And they went online and they found ways of finding people. And we ended up having a bigger year in 2020 than we did in 2019, which is impossible. Which would have been, and which killed many companies and which hurt almost everybody. But we survived that because we made a huge investment in technology 20 years ago that continued to move forward to pay fruit. So I guess I don't know what the resilience lesson is in that, except that your failures are never as much of a failure as you think they are. I've been rambling here. How are we doing? We out of time? 7 more minutes. Thank you. Let me try not to waste it. We've talked about that enough. Let's go back to my friend in the Philippines whose father's pushing that cart. That isn't actually him, and that isn't exactly the cart, but it's not a great picture. And I think that's pretty much what we were working with, what she was working with. Worrying about her father, who she was trying to figure out how to save his life and how she was going to save her family, because her father breaks his leg, her family perishes. And so that was her constant worry. But he had taught her a few things. He'd taught her how to sell. She would go along with him on these trips. And he taught her how to close a sale on a potato. But the principle was there. He taught her how to work hard, even on hard days. Extraordinarily hard, all the time. Never quit. Stay with it. Ultimately, you'll prevail. She taught him how to not fear the daily cascade of change when you show up and yesterday's customer isn't there today and whatever's going on. Just be ready for everything to go wrong and be resilient and move on. And with those skills, he taught her how to mine the pennies so that they would accumulate into dollars. And so she said she took those skills and she came across this cosmetic company. She had no education. She had nowhere else to go to try. But she thought, you know what my dad does kind of translates into this. And she figured out how to trade in that handcart, that wooden wagon, into a e-cart on a technology page. Now, she got the skills to make that work on the streets of Manila, but she got that e-cart on the streets of Provo, Utah, 75 West Center Street. And with that, she was able to create a life. And when she was telling the story, she lived in a beautiful home in a beautiful neighborhood next door to her mother and father, who she'd been able to provide a home for, and he wasn't ever going to push that cart again because because she was able to take the skills her parents had learned her and translate that into the next thing. It is my confidence that we're going to figure that out too here in this community, that we don't need to lose sleep over our kids making a living. You'll figure that out. There is a next way, there's a next thing. If we can figure out how to get them through the cultural swamp that is trying to encroach upon us, their lives are going to be better than ours. Thank you very much.